Greetings and blessings, YouTube. This is John the Jansenist, also known as Hell's Unicorn. And this evening I'm just going to be doing basically a stream of consciousness blog regarding my views on the nature of politics and what I believe should become the standard Old Catholic / Jansenist view of politics in the Americas, if such a hybrid of ideas is ever to actually form in a meaningful way in this country. Since as of now, I think I'm the only outspoken representative of this viewpoint. I was basically inspired to do this by the recent current events surrounding the politics in the chaotic system that America currently has, particularly the advent of the Tea Party and its fervor towards religious conservatism and its opposition to the secular progressive tendencies of the left and of the center-right Republican Party in this country. So I'm basically going to lay out my commonalities and my differences with the majority of the Tea Party members, and I'm going to preface this by going back to the founders of this country and just laying out some distinctions between the various groups that made up the founders. The first group that I'm going to mention are the more subversive, basically atheistic members of the deist camp of the Founding Fathers. This was Thomas Paine and Ethan Allen. And these two are probably the most influential within current secular progressivism, and perhaps to a lesser extent Thomas Jefferson. He's a little bit more influential in libertarian fields, basically, but he does carry a level of influence within the current left. And the thing to note about them is that their rebellion against theology basically came with it a rebellion against any real objective standard of reason. They touted reason as their primary source of truth and that they were quote-unquote rational thinkers. But if you follow the course of events in their lives, both of them ended up mostly mixed up in some kind of revolution other than the American Revolution, and they found themselves basically at the wrong end of the authorities of wherever it was that they were. They basically craved revolution, and they were never content with getting basically either all or most of what they wanted. When America was founded, Ethan Allen was basically not satisfied with the way the system had developed, probably because of compromises made between the various churches and the political establishment of the colonial period before the Declaration of Independence. And Thomas Paine was so wrapped up in his basically his quest against the church that he found himself in France pushing another revolution along with others, one that ended disastrously and one that should never have been repeated, but would end up being repeated in Russia, in China, and in other places under a different name and under a moniker much more hostile to Christianity, being Bolshevism and Maoism. But moving on from them, the next field that we get into is sort of the more moderate deistic camp. And among these you have individuals like James Madison, and Benjamin Franklin, Thomas Jefferson, and they're more sort of on the center left of the debate, while the more conservative-minded people, and those that I think were probably more Christian than deistic, being George Washington and John Adams. Now, John Adams in particular is a bit of a difficult personality to nail down because of his Unitarian nature. I mean, the church that he belonged to became Unitarian, and Unitarian is viewed by many as a form of Christianity, but it's an anti-Trinitarian form, so it's very heretical, and whatever doctrines are maintained within it are influenced by this primal heresy, which basically affects the entire relationship that the believer has with God in ways that I'm not going to get into at this time, but very large ways, let's just put it that way. But of the more center-right-minded people in the deistic camp, there is a strong tendency towards Calvinism. And indeed, the third group, which is the group that I am most similar with, the Calvinists of the early days of America, particularly John Jay, Samuel Adams, and Patrick Henry, there was a stronger emphasis on the idea of separation of powers and of a collaborative nature between the individual man and the many, or the one and the many, as it were. They didn't see a necessary conflict between the church, the state, or the individual. They viewed all three as being able to be harmonized under a specific set of objective standards. And those standards circled around similar concepts of the Jeffersonian concept of life, liberty, and property. But they were informed differently. They weren't informed by some obscure God of nature. They were informed specifically by the biblical God and the Holy Trinity, and there were specific arguments laid out for them. Now, the inheritors of the John Jay, Samuel Adams, and Patrick Henry mindset were the Covenanters of the Presbyterian Church, who owed their allegiance still to the Church of Scotland. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to read a section from a very important work that I think that anybody involved in politics and considers themselves a Christian should read. And this book is titled The Two Sons of Oil, or The Faithful Witness for Magistry and Ministry upon a Scriptural Basis. And this was written by Samuel B. Wiley, and he was a Presbyterian minister from the 19th century. And he starts off this work by quoting Revelations chapter 11, verses 3 and 4, and I will read those for you right now. And I will give power unto my 2 witnesses, and they shall prophesy 1,260 days, clothed in sackcloth. These are the 2 olive trees and the 2 candlesticks standing before the God of the earth. And now I'm going to read the preface of this book because I think it contains the most salient and yet the most general information about this work itself. The principles of Reformation are not fashionable. They were once, however, considered as the glory of Presbyterians. The time has been when the whole body of Presbyterians in Scotland, England, and Ireland unanimously subscribed them. For civil and ecclesiastical reformation, for a glorious covenanted cause, thousands have bled and died. In the following discourse, I have endeavored to advocate that cause, not because it is an ancient cause, not because many have sealed it with their blood, but because I thought it the doctrine of the Bible and the cause of Christ. I make no apology, I court no one's favor. A conviction of truth was the cause of publication. There may no doubt be unguarded expressions. Anything that is so, if demonstrated, will be candidly acknowledged. Now, the most important thing about this work is the covenant that existed between the Presbyterian churches of Scotland, England, and Ireland. What these amounted to was a complete agreement of faith between 3 separate nations, and thus the beginning of what could be called an ecumenical faith in the true sense, one where unity of doctrine and proper interpretation of doctrine was maintained. Now, there was a 4th party that almost became the 4th nation to be involved in this covenant, and that was Holland. And Holland, as many of you may know, is also the area where the Jansenist movement saw its greatest period of influence within the Calvinistic-dominated country of the Netherlands. And there is a strong commonality between the 2 movements, Jansenism and Calvinism, primarily in their rigorously scriptural and Augustinian approach to doctrine. However, they differ primarily in liturgical worship and to a certain extent in church politics also. And these differences are large enough to demand 2 separate denominations, but it does not necessarily mean that the 2 denominations can't unto themselves inform each other and come to an agreement on the general fundamentals of the faith. And so for that reason, I do view Orthodox Calvinists of the Presbyterian persuasion to be allies in the general cause of Reformation. I hold fast to the original ancient church liturgy that the Presbyterian Church, I believe, has abandoned in favor of a more ruggedly conservative view regarding the use of images and icons, and also a much more minimalistic view of the sacraments. But suffice to say, our views regarding the relationship between the sacraments themselves and the necessity of the Holy Spirit and the sacrifice of Christ always being present within those sacraments, there is basically no difference whatsoever, and those are the principal things of note within the general concept of worship within Christianity. Now, the thing is that when you look at politics today, you see essentially three different viewpoints regarding where politics should go, and this is something that is basically represented in no small amount by the current Tea Party movement. There are four viewpoints of government and their relationship with the church that are to be considered. The first of these is the viewpoint of theocracy, which is the idea that the church should run the state. This is a viewpoint that's held in varying respects by Anabaptistic Christians and Baptists, and certain Congregationalist blocs that hold fast to the viewpoint that the Christian community must be completely separated from the rest of humanity, and that the state must specifically be run by the church. By contrast, there is the viewpoint of the state-run church. This is the viewpoint that the Anglicans and the Lutherans adopted, in which the state runs the church. In other words, Caesar controls the Pope rather than the Pope controlling Caesar. And this viewpoint is pretty popular amongst most American Roman Catholics and also amongst Lutherans and Anglicans, who want a much more powerful central government that will basically legislate social justice. And you find a lot of people in the Christian end of the Democratic Party pushing this sort of belief system. The third viewpoint, which is shared by hardcore lefties and also by libertarians, is the viewpoint that the church and state should be completely separated, they should not converse with each other, and they should not be informed by each other at all in any respects. And this is the viewpoint that is, I think, wrongly taken out of Thomas Jefferson's words. This is something that is more in line with Thomas Paine's and Ethan Allen's approach to the subject. And this viewpoint doesn't work in reality when you have a system where there are confessing Christians granted the ability to vote. If you have a Christian voting in a system, the church is informing the state, just maybe not in the direct fashion that most are used to. The fourth position, and the position that I hold, is the position that the two offices, the two sons of oil, as it were, are to remain distinct from each other, but they are necessarily compelled to inform each other on certain issues. Particularly, the church has to inform the state on certain issues of conscience that directly relate to worship and to practice of the Christian faith. And because of this, the state is therefore compelled to recognize a certain church as being the official religion of the land. Now, how this works in practice is that you cannot have a federal church because you have too many different people in this country with differing opinions regarding religion, some having none at all, some of them having a modified view of the Orthodox approach to Christianity, some not being Christian but being theistic, and the minority position of mine and of the Covenanting Presbyterian, which is the original position of many of the original churches found in the colonies. So this is the position that I think any political movement of note should adopt, specifically if they want to be representative of the biblical view regarding church and state. I've provided a link in the description to the book, The Two Sons of Oil, and I recommend that anybody with any interest in both religion and politics read it so they know where I'm coming from. I do not hold exactly the same position regarding all issues as this book does, but I hold to most of them. And I will probably discuss this in a later blog, but for now, in nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti, God be with you.